start? I don't know, Scott should kind of.
You guys can go ahead now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
please do.
So we're not gonna. So if we spare time, so I believe we take about 2 hours to go through this. Tora says we can do it in 10 minutes. So probably in between us here, we can probably do it in 50. So that should be fine. If we're faster, then that's great. And I guess everybody will be happy about that. We want to tell you about our journey. So we're not going to introduce ourselves. So my name is Raul. I'm part of this team. Everybody who will talk is part of this team as well. And there was a presentation last year, I think, about the proof of concept being done by Marco, which sits over there with these guys, when they said, look, we deployed foundational services in Azure. And that was, so we came back to tell you what we did in the meantime, right? A year has passed. Hopefully we did a little bit more than just that. So, and actually we're quite proud of how far we are able to be in, depends of who you ask, 9 months to 1 year, right? This is the time frame that we're going to talk about. So, I don't know if all of you know about foundational services. I'm going to skip this fairly fast, but if you don't know about foundational services, it was called Atlantic some time ago. Then we tried to rebrand it to HGSP, Haufe Group Service Platform, and now we rebranded it again to foundational services, right? Due to extraordinary success, we felt the need to change the name twice. Basically, what we do is we provide single sign-on services, user management, license management to some of the products in Haufe, order management, and partner services. And throughout the years, we've added smaller services, smaller things, mainly because we were one of the services that were exposed to the internet. So whenever we wanted to have a service there, we we got attached to that. So we grabbed it. We're calling ourselves nowadays an API first product, internal product of Haufe. That means that what we offer are services and APIs. We don't really have a UI, right? Except the login page, which less and less of external products are using, right? Everybody kind of rolls its own. And we're quite used. We have more than 2 million requests per day from pretty much all of you here. And we also have what we call, high cost or high valued transactions, since we also do orders. If you lose one call, that can potentially mean 10K loss for Haufe, right? So we are high volume, 24/7 service, and every single call is potentially quite important. So this is a little bit the start. And when I joined, like, as I said, less than a year ago, this team, this was the stack that we started with. So it's a fairly standard stack. It's a J2EE application. We missed the two. We use Solr, we use Postgres, we have an ActiveMQ, so as you imagine, some of the services are, so we need to be resilient even internally. So we use a lot of queuing and all of those things. Postgres, and for single sign-on, we are based on an open source project, which is called OpenAM, that we've highly customized. And let's say we're quite in control of the things that we build, but Tora will come a little bit later and will tell you about the challenges, let's call them like that we had with kind of Dockerizing and using the same idea of continuous delivery with a solution that was maybe not built for that, or even ForgeRock was not really, which is the company that takes care of it, was not really in the position to have a solution that's being deployed every day. I'm supposed to talk about this for 10 minutes, so we kind of need to skip to stay with a plan. When we started, so there were a lot of discussions about what would be the future of foundational services, because it seemed things were getting slower and slower. We came from let's say a year ago, we had to announce a year in advance when we would be releasing throughout the year. We had high cost of change and high risk of change, means that most of the times when we were going at 11 o'clock in the night, people from other projects felt that they need to stay alive, need to stay awake, sorry. need to stay awake just to make sure that when we release something, their product is also online still, or something that we didn't miss anything. We had about a 2-week stabilization phase, means that if we wanted to release every month, 2 weeks of that we were doing development, and 2 weeks of that we were just basically waiting for other people to say we can release, right? Which is a lot, in which time we were not doing really a lot of things. So the overall feeling, either from our customers nowadays, or what we call our users, right? And actually, all of you in the room are our users. The developers of Haufe are the users of foundational services. It felt like there was a high friction. You always had to send mails. How can I use this API? How can I do that? Can you give me a document? Where can we find that? So there was a high friction of integrating with us. There was this idea that we can't really keep up with everything that's going on in Haufe, and we were always on the critical path. So then, what can we actually do? And then we kind of took over this idea that we want to put foundational services. We actually want to. I have a slide about that. Yeah, no. So we have to start thinking of how we can be this high risk and high cost. How can we start being, let's say, in front of other projects? How can we start develop services that were not needed 6 months ago, but actually we see coming up in the next month? And how can we start doing that? And how can we start and how can we be taken out of the critical path of pretty much every single service or every single new product in Haufe? So we started on our journey, and Marco presented a year ago that we've managed to put foundational services in Docker, and we've actually managed to put that, like a single stack of foundational services, in Azure, Germany. So we said, if we are able to do that, why don't we actually go live with it? Why don't we start thinking, why don't we use these kind of principles, and why don't we turn foundational service into a solution or into a platform that it's continuously evolving? And we don't have fixed releases anymore. We don't need to ask for permission to do something. We are responsible for our services, and we start innovating at a faster and faster pace. So the rest of this talk will be about how far along are we on this journey, and what were our challenges, and how did we get where we are, right? Hopefully to the cloud. And that's my last slide, right? Okay. So where are we? So we actually did a lot of things at the same time, and a word of caution: whenever you do a transformation, take it one step at a time. We learned this the hard way. Tora will tell you more about this, but this is not a learning that you need to do. So in our first release, like big release that we did, we changed our application server from Glassfish to Wildfly. We took this, let's say, single stack of Wildfly, and we actually turned it into a production deployment that we could do. So it's highly available, zero downtime deployment. We're able to detect if a deployment was done right or not. We're able to see if that deployment meets our quality criteria or not. We changed the way we do testing, as in we took out all the tests that were done right now. So if we look back a year ago, testing was done with a completely different framework in a completely different way. Today, we're not going to really dig into this because we don't have time, but we have a completely new way of doing tests, all the way from unit tests to end-to-end tests. We use different frameworks. We do testing at various stages in our pipelines. And we went live somewhere in October. We went live with, so foundational services has two big parts. One is all of those APIs, and the other one is the single sign-on services. So we went live with Docker with all of our APIs. And again, so there's going to be a follow-up on our deployment process, but you have to understand that even our integration environment is something that needs to be highly available. Because most of you know that you test all of your test environments rely on login being available for our integration environment as well. Right? So if you think about continuous delivery and break fast, how are you able to have a couple of deployments per day, even to your staging environment, to be able to validate that in a way that you're not down all the time? We're not saying we're never down on that. We're just saying that we invested seriously to be down as little as we can. And that's also going to be a talk that we're going to have a little bit later on. The other part of our journey was about Dockerizing and going live and going with the same philosophy of immutable services, so on and so forth, with OpenAM. And we actually found out that that was really much harder than what we thought. If the wildfly part, we were quite happy with it, and it was easier than what we thought. The second part of the year was actually much harder than what we thought. In the meantime, we are also in the process of building a new license management service, or as Rainer wants to call it, a license notification service. And all that we've done until now was actually preparation for going to cloud. So our journey is like this. We wanted to Dockerize in place in the current infrastructure at MCS or Plus Server, as it's called right now, so on and so forth. So we use a static infrastructure. Then we want to go to the cloud that allows us to iterate much faster and use more and more services from the cloud, and maybe don't need to invest in every single thing. And maybe also use a different kind of container infrastructures. And then all of this why do we want to do all of this? Because at the end of the goal is that we are actually lowering this risk and this cost of change so that we can start iterating much faster and start splitting things apart. We want that all of our services to be microservices, but we need to be, and Fowler says it, you need to be this tall to be able to do that. And we found that if you're not starting in the right way, if you're not able to have a process that allows you to iterate very fast and allows you to innovate very fast, or to prove that, let's say, an assumption that you're making, a service that you're building, a change that you're making, if that makes sense or not. If it takes 1 month or possibly 2 months to validate every single little change, as it was a year ago, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be, every single thing is going to seem like super complicated, super expensive, and super risky. Where we are right now is that we can afford to do all of those things, because we can make a deployment anytime we want to. I'm good? Yeah. So, tell you a bit more about what were our challenges. We don't really want to tell you that we're great. Whenever we would rather talk to you about the challenges that we had, because I think that's where the value is. So hopefully you don't step in the same holes as we.
Hi. Okay. Hopefully I won't drop this. As Raul told you before, while going in Docker with Wildfly was challenging, going in Docker with OpenAM was going through hell for at least a couple of weeks. I don't know how many of you are aware of our downtimes or fluctuations on live, but I know for sure that Aurora Monitor was on it. And the fact was that we were very happy to go with a Docker image of OpenAM live. And we were also ambitious and a little stupid in trying to go with this architecture, which basically means that we had everything highly available. This is, we had the CTS. CTS servers had sessions. That meant that whenever we put up an OpenAM, no users lost sessions. This was huge for us because every OpenAM deployment meant losing login sessions. And we did that. We also did that for the configuration, that part over there. We also had load balancers in front of the OpenAM nodes, which were in. All this meant that when it all went downhill in about 2 days, for the first go live with OpenAM, we didn't know which was the problem. So we thought it was the OpenAM version. So we switched from OpenAM 12 to OpenAM 13.5. We did that, and we went down after half a day. We thought, I mean, the first problem we had was the fact that HA proxy in front of the servers that holded the sessions was doing a round robin between them, and they had replication on them, so they just started looping around. And so we panicked. So the first thing we did,
maybe just to come back a little bit, the reason why we did all of that is not because we wanted to get fancy maybe, but the idea is that each of our nodes of OpenAM is actually a stateful. So in the old days, there was a stateful OpenAM that was keeping sessions, right, in there. So if you want to do deployment there, you probably know, or if you're on this journey, it doesn't work great if you have stateful services, because you're going to lose the state every time you make a deployment. So what we said, we're going to take the infrastructure out of our OpenAMs. Because these are basically storages, they are LDAPs. We're going to take them out so that we are only left with the stateless application server. Because one of our rules when we say we want to do zero downtime deployment, but we want to do what we call them ghost releases. So nobody knows and nobody cares. So you can have your service available. There's going to be a business impact, right? Because people see that they lose their session. So if you want to do that a couple of times a day, we generate friction. So that's why we went with this, right?
Yes. That. Okay, so we panicked and we put everything inside OpenAM again, because this was an architecture that actually worked on live and for a couple of months with no problem. And we saw that we had the same problem. I mean, it still went down and it still had those CTS replication messages that we didn't understand. We came to this, which is now live. And, this works, and we still went down after half a day or a day, and we still didn't know why, and we went to ForgeRock, and we asked them to help, and they didn't. And afterwards, at some lucky moment, we got a memory dump from live to see what happened, and finally the team figured out that it was a problem with the JAXB old version of API implementation, which actually had nothing to do at all with OpenAM. OpenAM is a WAR file that is deployed in a Tomcat. We had the register application, which allows users in Haufe to register in Haufe, which was also deployed on the same Tomcat, and which, because of this library, screw up everything. Actually, what happened, it filled up the memory, and it just, at some point, it didn't respond. All the nodes went down. Now, all these topologies were deployed in the same time on several clusters, because what happened is, if one went down, we couldn't have downtime on live. I mean, users would complain almost immediately. So we switched from the load balancer, the HA proxy. When something went wrong with one configuration, we just switched to another, and tons of downtime. But imagine we did this for like 2 weeks continuously, from 11 p.m. to 1 o'clock in the evening. We were up, most members of our team, trying to deploy another configuration.
Maybe just to a few questions for you, Tora.
Okay.
You mentioned that these nodes or these clusters went down, right? You mentioned. Does it mean that also this going down was visible to our customers?
No, it was not. I mean.
And as you also mentioned, our load balancers also were smart enough to be able to. We had multiple replicas and multiple clusters of different versions of different AM with different architectures and different configurations, all in standby. So if a node went down, that was still fine, because what the HA proxies did, either manually in the beginning or automatically towards the end, were retriggering a deployment of an architecture of these, right? So a node goes down, the other one starts to panic. We redeploy everything there because we have zero downtime with deployments. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and because we had everything in Docker with Docker images and everything with in GoCD, the actual installation of a new cluster of OpenAM would take about 5 minutes. So we were able to switch in between these. I mean, and because we panicked and we did not know what the problem was, we tried all these. So in the end, what we learned from this was that we should never try to go with multiple things at the same time, because we went with Tomcat 8 and Java 8 and the different version of OpenAM. This combination was the one that actually ruined everything. If we had gone with Java 7 and OpenAM 13, that would have been perfect from the start, and we wouldn't have gone through this. But I guess we all have to learn. Also, Docker is awesome. If this would have happened like half a year ago, not half a year ago, but 1 year ago, we probably would have had serious downtime periods on live. At some point, Raul suggested to me that we go to ForgeRock, and I was so sure we were so close to figuring out why this happens, and I said, no, just give me one more day, and after that I gave up and we went to ForgeRock. Honestly, I think I should have gave up a bit earlier in the process, because they can offer support. I mean, it's their product, they know what it is, and they should have said from the beginning, it's not our problem, you probably screwed up something else. And also, if you're working with Java, always enable JMX. I mean, this actually helped us, and we put this up with OpenAM, and we just saw on the graphs, we ran a test, and we saw how the memory consumption went up and how it crashed. And it was so visual and so easy to understand afterwards. In hindsight, everything was so clear. Also, what I found out that it helps, it is to have an ambitious and dedicated team. I mean, I was amazed to see like 6, 7 people up at night to see how this pans out, and also work on this without actually going into depression after a month of not working out. And the continuous delivery investment totally worth it. I mean, as I said before, it took very little time to spin up another cluster with OpenAM and have it switch online.
Maybe just a few questions for you.
Sure.
How often was the team deploying a new version of OpenAM, or in general a new version of foundational services? How often did this happen when we had issues like this?
In the past or now? OpenAM?
Yeah.
I think we did every day or 2, 3 days. We
actually did it every day.
Yes, 2, 3 times a day. We switched in between. In between configuration.
So what I actually was hinting towards was the fact that I mentioned in the past that we had this process of releasing every month, and that was a complicated process, and everybody was involved. But actually, we stress tested how much of this continuous delivery thing are we actually doing. We're not going to present all of our processes because there isn't enough time, but we had, from problem to solution. So from when we saw at 11 o'clock in the afternoon that the solution that we thought of, it doesn't work, or it's not doing anything better, until we had another solution, until that solution went through all of our stage gates, all of our processes, all of our tests, and until we were ready to deploy from our integration to live, we did that in 4 hours. It doesn't mean that we had a hotfix patch or something like that. That's how fast our process is. So we are able to go from problem to solution to potential solution in about 4 hours. We still had to do a deployment during the night because when we did these deployments, they were not zero downtime, right? We had to fill storages, we had to take down, we had to do some changes and so on. But fundamentally, we are able to do that, and I think that's a huge ability. Imagine if that time would have been 1 week. Created about 15 times, which live, if that was, but it was 1 week. How long would it take until we actually solved?
what was just like ran tests on load tests with lots of users. We went to 2,000 concurrent sessions, and it worked fine. And when we got on live, it just crashed. Okay. Next, I'm just gonna go through. This is like a year and a half ago. We had a blue-green deployment with some static load balancers in front and two application server clusters. The first with three Glassfish nodes, the staging, the second one with another three Glassfish nodes. Whenever we did a new release, we basically would install the staging environment, and then we would switch when we did the go live. We had about 2 weeks of needed time for integration testing for the other clients to test our product, and for a hotfix, I think we had at least 2 days of time to go and deploy it on live. So basically, it would have taken for anything to go live a very, very long time. What we have now is this, which is, well, in itself, it looks complicated, but it's not. I mean, basically because most of these boxes would not trouble you. Once you've deployed ActiveMQ, it would most likely stay there. This is the configuration we are having now on integration in Azure with a load balancer in front. It's very similar to what we have on live at MTS. We basically have HA proxies, all our servers, everything is in containers with the exception of Postgres. That part is the configuration for OpenAM, as I said. This one, the other one with lots of boxes, contains Atlantic deployed in the Wildfly servers, and also it contains down here the solution for we're planning for license management with Kafka and Kafka REST and schema registry Zookeeper. Basically, what we want to implement, and what we already have on integration. We also introduced, I mean, part of our splitting up Atlantic is splitting it up in microservices, and what we did so far, apart from working on this infrastructure part, is to take out small parts of it. For instance, SAP notification is one of it. And that one is a new application deployed, developed with Spring Boot and deployed in its own container. And next, I'll let Paul explain to you what we went through regarding our move from MTS to Azure.
So while Paul walks over, so you also need to maybe rethink a little bit, because we used to think in servers, how many servers you have, because one server, one VM, right? One VM meant that was a particular application. You have multiple of them. Right now, we start thinking in containers, and we have about 60 containers that we manage. What you don't see over there, you don't see anything like Swarm or like Kubernetes. We have a homebrew container management solution, which is a blessing and a curse. Would be interesting to talk about that. We're gonna, when we get towards the end of our presentation, we will tell you about what we plan for the future. But what you have to understand is that the fact that we control very granularly what do we do in those HA proxies, we were able to figure out when OpenAM was misbehaving, and then we were able to control how does that happen and how does the redeploy happen and so on and so forth. But that requires a high level of skill, which our ops guys have. However, not every developer in our team is able to do that. So, as I said, it's a blessing and a curse. It allows you to be very granular on how do you do that, and we have a homebrew solution. What does zero downtime mean? Paul will present it in a second, and so on and so forth. But maybe it doesn't scale with the services we would like to put in the future. I think once we pass like 40 containers or something like that, it starts to be a challenge to figure out where everything goes.
Yeah, this should be the picture for a container service solution maybe, but we have.
Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna repeat. So mm, yes. So I think always, I think always the longest the longest thing that is yes. So how did our working together change? The question was, how did our working together change when we started with containers and this kind of manage your own thing and this DevOps part and so on and so forth? Was that your question? Mhm. Okay. So the amount of operation knowledge, we were lucky because we had an operation team. So we had a traditional, let's call it like that, a traditional ops team that were managing all of those VMs. We didn't outsource that to someone else. What we did is that although they acted like a virtual team actually, in fact, and we kind of brought them in and we made them DevOps, and they actually are the ones, and Paul was part of that team, right? We don't have that team anymore. They are our colleagues. Everybody is using their skills. Everybody, because it used to be like a dev team and an ops team, right? And there was like this friction between the operations manual being updated or not, and so that's crazy, right? So now we are a single team. It's still true that this change to full stack, right? That everybody can do everything. It's a long process. Maybe we will never get there. But what we see is that there's a high degree of collaboration. When something goes wrong, and Tora mentioned that, the team was there. There was not once mentioned the ops guys were there or the dev guys were there. The team was there available. I think this is really important in terms of mindset. However, when we reach our limit is with this homebrew solution that Paul and Dume and Doru worked on and some other people, that it's hard to scale that out. It's hard to tell to a developer, okay, you can build your own service, right? We build new services and so on, put that in a Docker container, make a Docker Compose file. So all the way to our development environment, which is everything in one Compose, they can do. You can't tell them, make sure this gets developed, this gets deployed in a zero downtime environment, because we still need to change a lot of scripts. So this is kind of the splitting point. That still requires.
Yeah, but they learn to run also locally on their own PCs.
Yeah.
Start with the Docker Compose stuff or the environment, and then they can just test and do more things and install new versions, and they can do that pretty fast.
Yeah.
Somehow everyone adapts to.
And the test team, if you can still call it a test team, right? Not only do they do tests, they with help, sure. They did their automatic testing environment. They know now how to spin up, how to use the SDK of Docker to spin up VMs, to deploy Docker on that, to actually write in Go or to change actually the script that we have that write on raw Rocket Chat every single time there's a test failing and so on. And that's all done by people who in the past used to do mainly manual tests. Right?
Now did deployment on Azure, create the VM there on Azure, run the test, and so they did everything. All the scripts that had to create, of course with some help, but they did it on their own. So,
and yeah, I think one of the things that I'm at least proud of is that we see that talking a couple of weeks, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I will, and then I get the hit afterwards. So we were talking about what kind of composition we need for the new fiscal year, right? So do we need, maybe we're going to do, I mean, we did most of the regression tests by now, right? So then there was a question, okay, we might have much more, but we also might have less of tests. So then the question to some of them was, okay, would you like, for example, to kind of get this knowledge that you have now and go to another project or two and kind of spread it out? Or you would like to maybe get a new challenge inside foundational services and maybe work on the new services we want to put. But that's not going to be, mainly testing. It might be mainly developer. It might be mainly DevOps. And every single one of them said that they want to stay. And for me, that's very interesting. Some of your project might miss out on some help, but we will make sure that if somebody wants it, we're going to help out with the good and the bad that we did, right? We're not great across the board, but we're going to share this. But every single one of the people that are in foundational services love it and want to stay there, even if it means not staying in their comfort zone. And for me, that's a big win.
Yeah, so I guess we can continue, right?
Yeah.
So at least we learned a thing that we should not change that many things in the same time after the OpenAIM part. So what we did, at least for the hardware part, for the VMs and stuff like that, we just used the same way that we have it before on MCS. So we just moved to Azure and use the same infrastructure. I mean, the same building of the VM, just VM where we have Docker and deploy everything on it. So at least for the development environment, as we can start with that one. Before, on the proof of concept that we had last year, we deployed everything with Docker Swarm on Azure.com. So there, everything was working okay, no problems. The change to Azure DE for this one was a big of a deal because we just needed to change the target, so just to have the deployment on Azure Germany. So the rest, everything was almost the same for this one. So what we are doing here, we are using the old Docker Swarm, not the Swarm mode, because we didn't want to change and we didn't have time to change that also here. But what we do, we are recreating everything, the entire cluster from scratch every night and day, because we don't want to shut down the VMs there. Since we are creating it with Docker machine, if you do a shutdown, then it's still accountable there. So we are just removing everything and recreating it from scratch every day. So we have patches, for example, because we use the latest image from the Azure and also the latest Docker engine. So mainly everything should work. And we can see also if there are problems that can occur if we have the latest things deployed there.
Yeah. One thing that I would like to add is that actually in our development environment, which is isolated, we blast it and we kind of try to kill it, right, as far so that it doesn't die later on. But actually, this is a good thing is that we actually put our state, so the DBNs on also inside Docker. So we found that in this case, it's good that we will regenerate every single time with the same initial state. So here we do have Postgres running in Docker, and when we kill the VM or when we stop it, we just reset it all the time, and that allows us to run our tests. We have about 750 API tests that we run on this that actually create a lot of garbage, and we don't have to clean up.
Yeah. So, yeah, how Raul said, we are running also the testing automatically after each deploy that is done. They are triggered automatically, and we post the messages on the Rocket chat each time automatically there. So you can see the report over there and just do the things and maybe do a redeploy on the environment. During the day, the environment is running because it's faster. We have 3 VMs there, and if we just recreate them, it takes about 10 minutes to recreate on Azure the VMs. So just to be faster, we just keep them there. Yeah, we use also the latest images that we have, the Docker images with the latest tag, because we want to test everything that we have, the latest code that we have. So for the dev environment, we thought that it's okay to have it like this. For the integration part, we created the integration, the migration to integration from MCS to Azure wasn't that hard, because since we had everything in Docker and we had an MCS Docker engine on Azure DE, we just needed some VMs with Docker engine installed on them. So what we did we just needed to focus on how to create those VMs and things that we had on MCS as a load balancer. Also, we had to create a Postgres there on our own and stuff like that, where we had to investigate some time. So we are creating the VMs with Docker machine here also. So create the VMs there statically. We can just recreate it. We are thinking to recreate them once a month, but at the moment we just have them there and that's it. We have a VPN between Haufe and Azure. Thanks to the Haufe IT guys, to the ICT, they provide that for us. So everything is on a separate LAN there, and we just expose via the load balancer from Azure, everything, the endpoint. So yeah, we use the load balancer as a service. We have 2 public IPs there, and one for the API and the one for the SSO. So we just connect our AJ proxies, and all the logic is on our AJ proxies. So the load balancer as a service from Azure is just as a failover for our AJ proxies in case one is down, so it will go to the other one. We use that load balancer just for that.
Or in case we need to update some of the rules of our AJ proxies. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And maybe just also something interesting. We mentioned this 2 million requests per day. I think we're one of the projects that have the most load. We are running with actually one HA proxy. The other one is on hot standby. So we never had any load, memory, or whatever issues. Right? So if you think about something like that, you say, oh my God, we need like kind of big iron and kind of a lot of investment in load balancers. Actually, we're doing great. And if we're doing great, you're probably going to be just as fine.
Yeah, we had the experience with when we had the problems with OpenAM, then we gained a lot of knowledge while changing a lot of things with the HA proxies. So we don't have a service discovery to use for the HA proxy, so we use just a static configuration. What we did is that we try to find some the endpoints that we had that are needed in our application and also support. So we had 2-3 checks for each container/application where we checked, and if something was wrong, the HA proxy, even it has a static configuration, it will remove that from the backend pool. So yes, still after we create those VMs on Azure, so it is almost the same thing as we have on MCS. The thing that we gain is that here we just can recreate or do whatever we want with those VMs, is that still we have everything in containers. Now, for sure, for our integration system, because we had some problems with the high available process that we had, now it's also this database in containerized. Just for testing purposes, as we have also the LDAP containers for OpenAM, we use also this one till we will figure it out with the high available process that we should have for the live, because live is more sensible. When we create those VMs, we also use the persistent storage. The persistent storage, the storage we created manually, and we can just mount it every time when we create the VMs automatically via some scripts that we create when we deploy and when we create with Docker machine, everything. We tried some plugins from still we had problems because they don't support it, just Azure.com. So we integrated also the HGG part. Since that they are on a different network, there we had some problems because we had to put them on our load balancer stuff. So also at the moment, because they have a separate subnet, we are going to the load balancer. So we are connecting to the MCS load balancer, and going to the backend pools there. Also we tried some ghost releases for when we go live with our integration system. We switched from MCS. So because we didn't want to do the DNS change, we went through the MCS directly on the Azure load balancer. So we just did some tests, switched back, and was somehow we didn't have downtimes for our integration. That is still important also for customers.
Maybe just one thing to mention. So what we do here, you see that it's pretty much the same as we did on a regular hoster, because there are a lot of constraints regarding that, and a VM takes 3 days, and based on our learnings, right, with OpenAM, we said we're not going to try to make too many changes at the same time. So if you have a static infrastructure at our hoster, we're going to go initially with a static infrastructure in the cloud. We know that we could have done it differently. We know we could have recreated the VMs every single time we deploy and so on, but we said we want to limit as much as possible the differences, and actually that also made this migration quite easily, because once you are there, you're much more free to change something. But if you want to do multiple things at the same time, we kind of, we wanted to stop ourselves from, because this is always the urge, right? But we are changing right now. Why don't we create the VMs all the time with the Azure driver? Because you could do that. Why don't we go with Swarm? There were some discussions and so on, since we anyway do the move. What we caution you is that don't give in. Make them small and nimble, because they're things, because if something goes wrong, you never know where to look.
Yeah, we had the experience with OpenAM, so that. Yeah, here we have just a picture how is our environment in Azure. So yeah, we have the VMs and everything that the VMs have the Docker engine there and load balancer. So everyone is connecting through the internet because we have no restrictions there. Everyone can access it, and we have the VPN and the tunnels through the Haufe and also to MCS. The ICT helped us a lot with this and to figure it out and to make it work. So it was a challenge also this, because we had a lot of clients that are connecting to us and we had to find who and for who is not working, and there were like we lost some time with this also. Wasn't that smoothly. Now I have an example for our live deployment pipeline. This I can just explain you in a short way. So the first thing is that we created VMs. This is for our MCS. So the live we don't have it on Azure at the moment. So we are aiming to that. But just as an info, we use the generic driver for Docker machine, connect to those VMs. This is the first step. And after that, we have some separate steps where we deploy our application. For example, the HGSP stuff is deploying the Wi-Fi part. After that, the OpenAM. We have after that a notification when that we post it on our Rocket chat. We have a channel there, so we post when the deployment is done. We run the test against the thing that we just did, and after that, since we are monitoring our stuff with checkmk, if we will recreate the VMs and the VMs will have a new IP, we can just update those IP directly on the checkmk with this plugin.
Yeah, and actually regarding this, we said, it would be nice if we can make a demo. So as I said in the beginning, we had we used to plan this for months and so on. And we said, let's make a demo, but what would have a lot of impact? And while we will take a certain amount of risk here, we said, why don't we just do a deployment on live right now? So that's what actually Paul will do. So this is
it's on me. Yeah.
So this is peak time for our services, right? It's not 11 o'clock in the night. This is peak time, and we are fairly confident this will work out.
We have the entire team in Romania that's waiting for this.
So what we will do right now, and this is so Paul will click a button and we will deploy our Wildfly things on live. We're not as comfortable with OpenAM, so OpenAM we will not deploy right now, but we will take whatever we have on integration. So we always deploy what we have on integration. Whenever we do a deployment to live, we take what we have on integration and we move that to live. We're going to skip the OpenAM part, okay? And we're going to do, but imagine all of our services are used by the login service as well. So if we are down for even 1 second, we will get a ticket, for sure. So
I started.
You started, right? So that will run. Paul, maybe you go through what actually happens and how do we do the zero downtime quickly, because people want to eat. Yeah. Then we have two more things and then we're done, right? One way or another, we have done.
Yeah. So the thing is that we have a script that's doing that, since that we don't have a container service management. So we iterate to each Wi-Fi. We just get the new version of the Docker image that we have, stop the new one, the one that is there on the first server, then deploy it, and we do some checks. So we check some endpoints from that container. Yeah. So if something goes wrong and the things will not respond, then we just stop there, and we still have two other containers that are up at the moment, and that's it. So we have to just investigate and things like that. And if everything was okay, it will iterate to each server, since that we have three Wi-Fi servers with 3 containers there, and it will redeploy everything there. So at the end, that should be all. At AJ Proxy, we know because we have the logic in AJ Proxy. So how I explained you before, we have some checks. Again, the same check that we do with our script, we have also set it in our AJ Proxy configuration.
Yeah, I think one of the things, so initially, correct me if I'm wrong, we kind of waited. So we said, oh, a normal deployment will take about 5 minutes. Let's wait 5 minutes per instance. But as we move towards faster and faster deployments, and we are actually measuring the time that it takes, one thing is the time that it takes, from problem till we have a solution, we get that deployment. So we said, 4 hours, let's say. We're also measuring our ability to deploy. How fast are our pipelines? And actually, that's when we change. Is it still going fine? Okay, good. So we check. Right now, we don't wait for a certain amount of time because that would be lost time. Actually, HA proxy is actively checking if certain endpoints are there, and we know when a deployment is ready on one node, and we can go with the other, right?
Yeah. So it went through the first node. It was responsible with 200, so it went to the next one. So we will wait till George will present his one, and we will receive the report on the Rocket Chat. We will show you afterwards.
A report, a good one or a bad one.
So hello everyone. I'm George. I'm one of the developers of the foundational services team. What I really quickly want to talk about is our portal, our developer portal. Here you can register your applications and then get an API key and start using our APIs a little better. It also provides. Actually, let me just do a quick demo.
So while he does an alt tab, that should be the new way all of you interact with foundational services. We aim to remove the need of you sending us emails, of you kind of expecting us to make documentation, especially for projects X or Y, and we want to be valued by you. We want to be evaluated by you based on how much are we self-serviceable.
You can log in with your ADFS account, and then you can see our APIs.
Microphone.
You can use your right. Thank you. So you can see the APIs. You can see. Let's just pick this one, and then get to the description and a short description, and then you can actually go to the Swagger files and see the operations and so on. And if we pick this one, you can see examples and everything. So that's what I wanted to show. Are there any developers in here using our APIs? Yeah, please do check it out. Have a click, see how it goes. Do provide feedback if you like it, if you don't like it, what you don't like. Yeah, thank you.
So regarding this, at the moment, this is just on integration. In the next release, we're going to make it available on live as well, because we always go with everything on live, right? However, while the portal is available for you to use, the gateway behind is still not yet highly available. So look at the documentation, but the gateway we will have to make, production ready a little bit later on. Because if you go to the gateway right now, if that node goes down, oops. And what you might notice is this is Wicked. It's our biggest open source investment started by Martin. And we're fans of that, and we want to contribute later on to that project as well. When we get a little bit more experience, and then probably when we will get feedback from you what it doesn't work in our context. So we really hope, yes? So the question was if we plan to use API keys. Yes, we believe API keys are actually a very big step forward, because that's right now we still have customers, we don't know who they are because we just have an IP. We don't know who that is. Something goes wrong, we have to kind of ask around. That's not really a good way. With API keys, we will be able to kind of get better control.
Yeah, to better trace what happened and where the call came from and so on. So we would like to migrate all our customers, hopefully, towards the API portal and toward the gateway.
Maybe just one last thing. I don't know if I'm lying or not about this, so Tora has to tell me if I am. All of our API tests that we do on the dev environment go through our API gateway, or? Okay, so they can go to our API. Okay, never mind. Okay, so we have it implemented, but it's not running at the moment.
Yeah.
So we don't dog food this year.
If you can send on the URL, then I can publish that to the DevOps community.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, any other questions about it? Otherwise, we're itching to go back to see if the deployment was okay. Okay. So, thank you, Sergey. Paul?
Yeah. I don't think it's done, but at least we have the.
So, but we have time then for a little bit more questions. We have one last slide about what we want to do in the future, but frankly, we can skip that if you have questions about this stuff. Yes.
Yes.
So the current team size, as we are still a monolith, right? So the team is a little bit bigger. We have 12 people in the team. Would be, and that's going to be, on the last slide, what we want to do in the future. We would like to, obviously, all of what we've done until now, including, go live and Azure, everything feeds into our ability to innovate and change things faster. Therefore, we would like to go with microservices next. So once we have all of this split up, then we can start thinking of, do we need to have one team? Does it make sense to do? We were thinking of maybe we have two smaller teams, but the reality is that as they work on one code base or there is one release, it doesn't make sense to make. It would have been too artificial.
Yeah, so the deployment was done, and we received also the message on Rocket Chat.
I feel a butt.
No, just that the deployment was successful, but now we are running the test. And since that we changed the way on how we are running the test, so for each run of the test, we are creating a machine in Azure, pull the Docker with the Docker Compose all the images, and just then afterwards play the test. And it takes about almost 10 minutes to create and download the infrastructure because it's quite we have some containers there to download. So I think just now it started to play the test. So it has to take I guess some more 5 minutes till the tests are ready. So but I can show you how the report would look. So we will receive something like this on our Rocket Chat channel. So
so we have now notifications since last week. I was very surprised by this. I didn't know that you did it, and we also had the reports from our testing framework. And actually, this channel, we have two channels. One is Atlantic Build, and the other one is Atlantic. Atlantic Build is the channel where normally we send all of our notifications. Any of you that still has, because that was the other thing, other projects felt like they would be missing out. Yeah, it worked. All green, yes. That projects that used to be involved in this project, in this process of deploying, were now missing out on stuff because they never know what happens when are we doing things. So we are promoting the Atlantic Build channel. Go there, and you can see whenever we do a deployment. You can see if those tests pass. And if they don't, you can even see screenshots. What did it go wrong? What went wrong? We also know that we're not done. It's a journey, so we're continuously improving this. But in our opinion, at least, it's much better than where we were.
Yeah. So this is the detailed report. Now we don't have any fails, it seems, but you can also see it like this. So yeah, mainly this is it about the deployment, and we did the deploy on live during the stage. Yes.
That's supposed to be the second to last slide, right? This is the picture, so that's easy. So as I started with, we believe that you have to be this tall to start on the microservices journey. And actually, what we did this year is we've grown up. We've gotten to the point, and actually, hopefully, we're going to get to that point in less than a month when we actually plan to go live with Azure. So there's still some legal things we need to figure out and so on and so forth. We have the green light from everybody except I think Joachim that didn't explicitly say yes yet. We don't know if we have to do a TRB or not. Maybe we do a lightweight TRB. Just saying. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. So we're just going to clone the pipelines and we're just going to go live with it. Well, it's a little bit more than that. But basically, this is what we want to do in the next year because we were asked, okay, so what now? As I said, so we want to go live in the very near future. We have the new license management, which we started working on, but this is not We're going to do some dog fooding first, so we're going to use our existing license management, connecting to the new one, all fancy stuff. Then our integration framework, we would like to rethink about that, and we take this opportunity to encourage you to contribute that. It's an internal open source project, so everybody who feels like the tests that we are doing, either on integration or on live, don't cover a certain use case, we are more than happy to either do it if we have the time, or if we think that, hey, maybe this is not a core use case of us, but we encourage you to write your test over there. We're just going to make a quick code review, and we're just going to run that every single time we do a deployment on integration. And then we have a separate suite that we run every time we do on live. The reason is that obviously on live, we can't do disruptive changes. We can't just create orders on live. So we do less tests on live than on integration. And we will not deploy on integration. Well, let's say it like this. We started with not deploying on integration if the tests failed. We did a rollback. What we saw is that 80% of the time it's not a problem of foundational services. It's that those end-to-end tests involving multiple systems are so brittle that they fail. So what actually we now take a manual decision if we roll back or not. So we see the tests failing, and then we have a look and see, is it because of an email server? Is it because of a system not being available? Or is it actually because we screwed up and then we revert? And then, all of this goes of this idea that foundational services is not just a foundational big service, but we start having microservices and we can evolve. We have new services lined up for the next fiscal year. And we would also like to, I wouldn't say sundown, but we would like to make some of our services not foundational anymore if they only have, for example, just one customer. And we would be more than gladly handing them over to that particular customer to take care of them. And because it's not foundational anymore. Maybe it used to be at some point, but not anymore. Since everything is in one box, we can't do that. But you might be on the other end of this story when you might give you your little service that you need to take care of or sundown. So this is our story. This is how far we got. We have a lot of things to do in the future. And thanks to the guys here for presenting. We were super scared of doing this. And thank you to everyone else who actually helped out.